أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. I pray you're all well, and it's an honor to give this small presentation, hopefully no more than 10 minutes, about how we can prepare for Muharram, especially during the time of COVID-19. And I also want to just express my thanks, first of all, to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me this opportunity to address you. But second, to Taha Collective for again inviting me to address all of you during Muharram. I remember the wonderful times we had last year in the church hall, and I miss all of you, and I wish I could be there in person. But inshallah, there is a maslihah of doing this online. So hopefully we can connect and at least engage with each other online. So preparing for Muharram, how do we tackle this? I was reflecting over the last couple of days, and for me at least, there is always one hadith and one personality that strikes in my mind as a reference point of how we can think about Muharram, and that is Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam, the 8th Shi'i Imam. And I've chosen him because we have quite a famous and well-known narration in Uyun al-Akhbar Rida, compiled by Shaykh Dr. In volume 1, hadith number 28. And it's probably a hadith you all heard before, but I want to tackle it from a particular angle. In this narration, Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam is relaying to his companion Ibn Shabib what happened in Muharram, and the facts, the injustices, and how he himself felt. Now, I've chosen the 8th Imam precisely because he, of course, wasn't there in Karbala, right? And to give you some dates, Imam Husayn alayhi salam, our beloved master, passed away, was martyred 680 CE or 61 AH. The 8th Imam passed away 818 CE or 202 AH. We are talking about a span of over 100 years from the massacre of Karbala, the death of Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam, to the death of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. And the question that I'm posing to myself, and inshallah that I'm sharing with you, is how did the 8th Imam alayhi salam, as someone that was not present in Karbala and removed in a way from the immediate massacre, because of course Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam was ill during Karbala, so he was there. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam was young, but our 8th Imam wasn't there. So how did he understand, remember, and capture what happened in Karbala? And how did he relay it to his companions? And 3, how did he make sure that he made everybody remember the salient points of the event? And if you think about it, we are in some respects, of course not completely, but in some respects in a similar circumstances. We were not there during Karbala. Number 2, we of course are far removed in time from it. Number 3, we don't have the natural environment of the masjid, which is what COVID has done. It has forced us in a way to become more inwards, to remain at home, perhaps reflect more if we have taken the opportunity to do so. It's even forced us to think how we can practice our faith, connect with our families, connect with our community in a very different way, whether it is online, whether it is limiting it to certain individuals in the home, whether it is in the way that we teach our children, whether it is in trying to understand and capture what we remember about the masjid and what we think Islam is now, given the fact that we have to limit ourselves in the home. So this is the kind of comparison I'm making. So now we go to the hadith. How did the 8th Imam alayhi salam approach this sort of scenario where he is obviously removed in time from the massacre of Karbala? And I'll just read a few lines and extract the analysis. So he says, Ya Ibn Shabib, إن المحرم هو الشهر الذي كان أهل الجاهلية فيما مضى يحرمون فيه الظلم والقتال لحرمته فما عرفت هذه الأمة حرمة شهرها ولا حرمة نبيها لقد قتلوا في هذا الشهر ذريته وسبوا نساءه وانتهبوا ثقلا فلا غفر الله لهم ذلك أبدا. Says, O Ibn Shabib, indeed Muharram, it is a month in which the people of ignorance, the Jahiliyyah, had forbidden injustice and killing. That forbidden it. You cannot kill in this month because they were sanctified months that you were not able to kill or attack anybody. Then he says, our dear 8th Imam, that this nation didn't recognize or didn't understand the sanctity of its month of Muharram and the sanctity of its Prophet Rasulullah. See, going back to the Prophet. Indeed, they killed in this month. Who did they kill? They killed his progeny, which is Abu Abdullah, Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. They imprisoned or held captive the women, and they plundered or seized their belongings. Indeed, Allah will never forgive them for that. Why this aspect? Why is he starting off like this? If you look at it, the 8th Imam is first of all explaining the pure facts of what happened in Muharram, which is that in 680 CE or 61 AH, the Jahiliyyah, as he says, or the people of that society in Karbala violated their own laws and customs. So that means they went against what they set to kill Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. So when we commemorate Muharram, whether in our homes or in the masajid, we must reflect, what were the facts of this scenario? Yes, we have emotion and we have poetry, which he does express. He does express the emotion. I'm going to come on to that. But if you look at the way he's starting, he's first of all explaining what happened. And when we commemorate Muharram, sometimes it's very easy to not strike the balance between understanding the historical aspect and the injustices, and sometimes we go straight to the emotion, which of course is important, but we must not lose the actual lesson of Karbala. What was the lesson of Karbala? That a society cannot violate its own rule of law. Now, whatever rule of law that was, whether it was for a time period of some months or in Muharram, they actually went against their human decency, their own laws and customs to kill Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. That should make us think about what kind of society and the kind of leaders that carried out these killings, and how we can compare that today when countries violate their own customs and laws to accomplish self-interested ends. Number 2, he talks about the sanctity of Rasulullah. We cry for Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam, no doubt. But what was he doing? He was upholding the message of Rasulullah, as he says to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, that I have not risen to create discord or corruption. I am there to rectify the affairs of my grandfather Rasulullah and my father Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam, to do amrul ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. Or as it says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, i'idlu huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa. Be just, it is closer to God consciousness. So we have to also remember that Karbala reflects the message of Rasulullah, the message of the Quran. So in preparing for Muharram, it is not just about the personality of Husayn alayhi salam, but what Husayn alayhi salam represents, which is the message of the Quran, which was being corrupted in that society, and the teachings of Rasulullah. So perhaps we can take time to read the Quran and think about what is justice and what is injustice, speaking the truth in our life, doing that which is just, doing that which is courageous, which is always difficult, whether at a community level, whether at a society level. It's very difficult to have that courage. But if we can speak the truth, then we are on the path of Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam, which I remind myself and inshallah we remind each other. Then he of course talks about the specific injustices that happened. And you can see this from the language. It says they killed in this month, they killed his progeny, they held the women captive and they plundered the belongings. So imagine the crimes they committed. Can we compare the crimes that happened in Karbala to crimes that are happening today? Yes, because Karbala is a universal event. And so in reflecting about Karbala, perhaps we can also think about, now that we are not in the immediate masjid setting, what other settings would be appropriate for the message of Karbala to be propagated in a universal way, in an appealing way to people, that they understand these kind of crimes and injustices that was sadly committed by Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And the last two lines, well, the hadith goes on, but these are the two lines that I'll say in the short time that I have. It says, Ya ibn Shabib, in kunta baqiyan li shay'in fa'abki lil Husayn ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. فَإِنَّهُ ذُبِحَ كَمَا يُذْبَحُ الْكَبْشِ. He says, if you want to cry for anything, cry for Husayn, the son of Ali. And indeed, he was slaughtered like a sheep is slaughtered. فَإِنَّهُ ذُبِحَ كَمَا يُذْبَحُ الْكَبْشِ. It's a very powerful line. Every time I say it, my heart moves. I'm just telling you how I feel in saying it. Because now the tone shifts from the facts and the injustices to his personal expression of grief. That is why I said that grief is important, but in the context and the balance of the injustices that happened, and to do so factually, not to exaggerate what happened, not to just be filled with emotion that we lose sight of the message, but to have the balance. Here he expresses the grief in a balanced way, saying, if you want to cry for anything, cry for Husayn. The implication or the signification of this is that the distress and the affliction and the massacre of Husayn alayhi salam is a benchmark for us. That if we think we understand grief, if we want to cry for something, we cry for something valuable. We cry for something worthy. And that worthy thing is the martyrdom of Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. Because of what he stood for, because of the struggle he and his family and his companions went through, that should bring about grief in us. That should make us think, what did he stand for? That is something to cry about. How did Husayn ibn alayhi salam die? This will hopefully move our hearts. He says, indeed, he was slaughtered like a sheep is slaughtered. Look at the metaphorical imagery he's using here. Imagine a sheep, innocent creature, white, a white creature, innocent, gleaming white creature, soft creature. How can you attack such a creature? But he says they did. They slaughtered like a sheep is slaughtered. Now imagine the blood going on the sheep and its wool. We see the blood marks. We see this is not natural. This is how Husayn ibn Ali salam was slaughtered. Inhumane, indecent way, that the arrows and the spears went into his chest. They did not spare him. They broke one-to-one combat. They surrounded him. So now we find here in these last 2 points is that the affliction that Husayn alayhi salam went through deserves our tears, deserves our grief. And we should think, if there's any musibah in our life, we should always think, what did Imam Hussain go through? Because that will put our grief into context, so we react in the right way, and we can trust Allah and be patient, which is of course difficult, but we try our best. And the last is the personal description and interpretation of the massacre by Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. What imagery moved him, or what event moved him? The actual killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What events move us? It of course may be the killing of Hussein ibn alayhi salam. What about how Abbas alayhi salam died? The fact that he stood for righteousness and stood by his brother Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. What about the pangs of thirst of children and their tears and their wailing for water? What about the bravery of Zainab salamullah alayha? So connecting to Karbala can be done very personally by picking out certain incidents. And we can do this for ourselves, our families, and our children through various activities, whether it is drawing or painting, whether it is a symbol, whether it is holding a small talk in the home just for some limited individuals or some family members. Whatever it is that connects us, we are free to do so. And so to conclude in these five points was that he mentioned the violation of laws and customs, the sanctity of Rasulullah, going back to the message of Rasulullah in the Quran, 3, the facts and injustices of what happened, 4, the affliction that Imam Hussein went through, and 5, the personal description and interpretation of Karbala. So now if we want to answer the question, we may not be able to go to a masjid. We may not be able to have a traditional program. But if Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam was able to think about Karbala in such a balanced, factual, emotive way, without that natural environment of being there actually, and of course he had the environment of being able to hold a gathering and remembering Imam Hussein Islam, yes, that is there. But if he could remember Karbala in such a way where he was not there, not in that environment and far removed from time, maybe we can do the same. And maybe a change in this way, not being in our traditional environment or far removed from time, helps us to think about Karbala in a deeper way, to reform our own souls and reform society, inshallah. رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا مَعَ قَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. We give our salams to you, Imam Hussein, and to your son Ali ibn Hussein, to the children, to the companions of Karbala, all of you. And oh Allah, please, now I think this is a prelude of what's going to happen as I lecture at 1:32 o'clock in the morning, losing voice. But please, can we end on a Surah Al-Fatiha for all of our beloved marhumin, and inshallah I will see you all very soon. Jazakallah for listening.